Karoline Leavitt came in swinging, ready to steamroll another segment and score a headline. But when Jasmine Crockett calmly pulled out a leaked memo mid-interview, the studio cracked, the internet exploded, and Karoline's entire strategy collapsed live in front of the nation. The lights came up before anyone was ready. 3 cameras locked into place. 2 hosts sat just out of frame waiting for their cue. And in the middle of it all, between teleprompters, prep cards, and the hush of pre-broadcast breath, sat Jasmine Crockett and Karoline Leavitt. The Chiron hadn't even hit the screen when the tension started to hum. It was early, 8:40 a.m., but no one looked tired. Crockett's blazer was slate blue, crisp at the shoulders, and not a single strand of hair moved as she settled in. Her fingers didn't tap. Her foot didn't bounce. She simply waited, measured, still. Leavitt, by contrast, came in hot. You could see it before she opened her mouth. Quick smirks, crossed arms, eyes already scanning for angles. She was the kind of guest producers love. Predictable fire, sharp elbows, soundbite ready. She adjusted her mic herself, didn't thank the crew, barely glanced at Jasmine. To most people tuning in, it looked like setup for a regular political panel. 2 women from opposite sides of the aisle. Left meets right. Calm meets chaos. The morning news equivalent of gladiator games. Twitter was already bracing for fireworks. Hashtags were preloaded. Clips would be sliced up before the credits rolled. Everyone thought they knew the plot. But this wasn't going to be a fight, not in the way people expected, because what no one saw, not the producers, not the viewers, not even Karoline Leavitt herself, was that Jasmine Crockett wasn't just coming to defend a position. She was coming to expose a strategy. Quietly, completely, without raising her voice once. And that was the difference. One woman came armed with talking points, the other came armed with truth. The countdown began. 5, 4, 3. Karoline smiled wide, already performing. Jasmine sat back slightly, hands folded, breath steady. 2. The moderator cleared his throat. Camera light flipped red. 1. And just like that, it was live. Millions of people watching. Most expected sparks. But what they really got, was a slow, deliberate burn that would leave everything scorched by the end. This wasn't their first time sharing a stage, or a headline, or a moment that would get clipped, captioned, and turned into digital combat. Jasmine Crockett and Karoline Leavitt had history. Not the kind you put on a resume. The kind you carry in your shoulders. The kind that builds with every "you're being emotional" disguised as "let's keep it civil." The kind that isn't written down, but everyone in the room feels the minute they sit across from each other. Their first clash came in a hearing 2 years ago. Leavitt had interrupted Jasmine 3 times in the span of 5 minutes. Each time, the tone got sharper, more dismissive. Jasmine held her ground, quietly, sharply, and countered with the kind of precision that didn't need volume. That moment went viral, but only the last part made the rounds. The part where Jasmine finally said, "Are you done, or do I need to wait for your next interruption?" Karoline called it sass. The internet called it grace under fire. Since then, their dynamic has been the same in every room, Karoline throwing fast jabs, leaning into sound bites and smirks. Jasmine choosing stillness over spectacle. Not because she couldn't match the heat, but because she knew exactly what heat costs you when you look like her. And that's what this always came down to, not policy, not platforms, but tone. Because when Karoline pushed, it was called assertive. When Jasmine responded, it was labeled aggressive. Karoline played the same card over and over. Talk fast, talk over, frame composure as performance and response as overreaction. She never said the words outright. She didn't have to. The implication always did the work. That's why Jasmine didn't flinch anymore. She saw the pattern, understood the playbook, and this time, she wasn't walking in reactive. She wasn't there to spar. She was there to end the performance. And in the folder on her lap, there wasn't a speech. There wasn't a script. There was a single sheet of paper, one that would turn strategy into confession and make the entire country watch what happens when you finally say out loud what's been whispered behind closed doors for years. Karoline Leavitt didn't waste time. The segment had barely begun when she jumped in, cutting off the first question halfway through its sentence, launching into a tight, polished rant that had clearly been rehearsed. Her tone was fast, clipped, and laced with just enough sarcasm to sound clever without sounding cruel. Except it was cruel, just dressed up in political polish. "I think what we're seeing here," she said, gesturing toward Jasmine without even looking at her, "is the same pattern we've seen from these progressive firebrands. Loud, combative, more interested in headlines than hard work." It hit like a soft slap. Smiling, calculated, dismissive. Jasmine didn't blink. Karoline kept going. "They talk about injustice," she continued, her voice rising just a notch. "But all I hear is hostility. Every time they're challenged, it's not about disagreement, it's oppression. It's the same emotional overreaction wrapped in moral outrage." The camera cut briefly to Jasmine, who was still, eyes steady, pen in hand, no reaction. But the viewers at home, they felt it. The audience in the studio, they noticed. There was a shift in the room, subtle but undeniable, a ripple of discomfort. Because even if they couldn't all name it, they could feel it. The way Karoline's words weren't just about policy, they were about presence, tone, volume, identity. Words like hostile, aggressive, emotional. They weren't just critiques, they were coded, crafted to delegitimize without ever saying the quiet part out loud. Karoline smirked as she spoke, glancing occasionally at the moderator, like waiting for a nod of approval. But Jasmine gave her nothing. No sighs, no eye rolls, no interruption. She just listened, letting Leavitt's monologue run long enough to expose itself. The moderator cleared his throat, finally breaking in. "Congresswoman Crockett, would you like to respond?" Karoline sat back smug, sure she'd put Jasmine on the defensive. But that's the thing. She hadn't, because Jasmine didn't come to defend herself. She came to shift the entire conversation. And what she said next, how she said it, would do just that. Jasmine didn't move at first. The camera was on her. The mic was live, millions watching. But she didn't rush to fill the silence. She let it breathe, let it stretch, let the audience feel the weight of what had just been said. She took a small sip of water, set the mug down gently, then looked directly at Karoline. Her voice, when it came, was low, even, measured like she'd practiced the sentence 1,000 times and decided it only needed to be said once. "I'll respond," she said, "but not to the volume, to the intent." Karoline blinked. The moderator shifted in his seat. The studio leaned in, because everyone expected a reaction, a counterpunch. But Jasmine wasn't swinging. She was slicing. She turned to the moderator, her words soft but precise. "There's a pattern we don't always talk about on these panels," she said, "the way disagreement turns into character attacks, not based on substance, but on tone." She let that sit. Karoline opened her mouth slightly, but Jasmine held up a finger, not to interrupt, but to keep the room still for just one more second. "I've been called emotional, hostile, unhinged, all for the crime of speaking clearly," she continued. "Meanwhile, others raise their voices, interrupt, dominate airtime, and it's considered strength, passion." The audience murmured, not loud, not yet. But the air had changed. Jasmine reached down and opened the folder on her lap, slid one piece of paper forward just slightly, but didn't hand it off. Not yet. First, she looked back at Karoline. "I won't match your tone," she said plainly, "because your tone isn't the point." And just like that, the balance of the moment shifted. The audience wasn't watching a debate anymore. They were watching a reckoning. Karoline adjusted in her seat, eyes narrowing. But it was too late. Jasmine wasn't reacting. She was laying the foundation. And the next move? It wouldn't be loud. It would be undeniable. The room was still, not silent. Mics were live, cameras humming, audience half-breathing, but still in the way a room gets right before a shift, right before something unspoken becomes undeniable. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't break eye contact. She simply reached down, opened the navy folder that had been on her lap since the start, and pulled out a single sheet of paper. No drama, just clarity. She looked at the moderator, not Karoline, and slid the document across the table. "I think this belongs in the conversation," she said. The moderator hesitated, then picked it up. His eyes scanned it fast, but the words hit slower. Visible confusion, then recognition, then discomfort. "This is from Miss Leavitt's campaign team?" he asked, careful. Jasmine nodded once. "Leaked anonymously, verified twice." Karoline laughed, a sharp, too loud laugh that bounced off the table and hit flat. "Oh, come on," she snapped. "You're bringing gossip now, anonymous PDFS?" But Jasmine didn't look at her. She looked straight into the camera. "This is a strategy memo," she said. "Internal. It outlines how to target women like me, not based on policy, but on tone. The language is precise. Push them emotionally, then frame the reaction as unstable." A ripple moved through the audience, real-time disbelief turning into realization. Jasmine continued. "It names names, myself, a few others. It doesn't debate our work. It dismisses our presence." Karoline's smile was tighter now, lips drawn. "This is a stunt." "No," Jasmine replied calmly. "A stunt is talking over someone for 8 minutes straight, hoping they'll break character so you can call it a meltdown." She folded her hands, didn't blink. "This isn't personal, it's systemic, and if it makes you uncomfortable, ask why it was written in the first place." The moderator was quiet now. Everyone was, because it wasn't just about the paper, it was about what the paper revealed, how control isn't always taken by force. Sometimes it's written into the plan, and Jasmine just read it out loud. Karoline cracked first. It wasn't a big moment, not at the beginning, just a small stumble in her words, then a sharp exhale, then the kind of too fast blinking people do when they're trying not to lose their temper on camera. "This is fake," she snapped. "It's fabricated. You're lying, and this is entrapment." But her voice had shifted. Higher, tighter. Gone was the smooth, confident tone she opened with. In its place was something brittle, like a glass trying not to shatter while already fractured. Jasmine didn't respond. She didn't need to, because Karoline wasn't fighting her anymore. She was fighting the page. The moderator looked at the memo again, then at Karoline. "Are you saying your team didn't write this?" "I'm saying it's garbage," she barked. "I don't know what that is. It's not official. It's a plant. You people—" There it was. That phrase. You people. Someone in the audience shifted in their chair. The energy thickened. The tension wasn't between ideas anymore. It was between exposure and reaction, between being caught and being seen. Jasmine's tone hadn't changed. Still calm, still composed. Karoline stood up briefly, then sat again, like her own body was trying to exit the conversation before her mouth could catch up. "This is what you do," she spat. "Play the victim. Weaponize identity. You come in with some sheet of paper and act like it's gospel." "It's your paper," Jasmine said softly, "and I'm not playing anything. I'm presenting what you hoped no one would see." Karoline looked to the producers off camera, eyes wide, searching for rescue. None came. She turned back, pointing now. "You planned this. You set me up. You want to look calm while I look—" "Angry?" Jasmine finished. "Unstable? Emotional?" Karoline froze, because that was the trap, not the document, the pattern. And she just stepped right into it, not pushed, just exposed. The moderator finally signaled for a break, but the damage had already landed. Karoline's control, gone. Jasmine's composure, still intact, and the paper, still sitting on the table, still telling the truth. Karoline's voice was still echoing when Jasmine leaned back in her chair. Not triumphant, not smug, just steady. The kind of steady that didn't ask for permission to exist in the space. It just did, fully, without shrinking. She didn't smirk. She didn't celebrate. She simply tapped her pen once against the table and waited for the moderator to continue. But the room didn't move. The moderator looked shell-shocked. The producers weren't feeding questions into his earpiece fast enough. The air felt dense, not like a fight had happened, but like something had been cracked open, something unspoken and ugly, and now it was on the table, printed in 12-point font. Jasmine adjusted the cuff of her blazer, slowly, measured, like time belonged to her now. Karoline, still seething, sat stiff with her arms crossed. Her earlier rhythm, those fast-talking barbs, the verbal gymnastics, was gone. What replaced it was frantic correction, deflection, denial. She spoke quickly now, but each word landed with less weight. She wasn't directing the room anymore. She was reacting to it. And Jasmine? She hadn't said a word in over a minute. She didn't need to, because that was the shift. The power didn't come from dominating the mic. It came from not needing to prove anything. The audience felt it. The studio crew felt it. Even the internet, watching in real time, time-stamping every moment, started pointing it out. "She's not rattled," one user posted on X. "She's running this without saying a word." Another clip was already making the rounds, just Jasmine sitting still while Karoline unraveled. The caption read, "This is what control looks like." That was the story now, not just what was said, but how it was carried. Jasmine had turned what was meant to be a spectacle into a statement. She didn't match chaos with chaos. She let it collapse under its own weight. The screen faded to commercial, or at least it was supposed to. The graphics rolled, the music played, the anchor's voice cut in with promises of more after the break. But the cameras kept rolling, and someone, somewhere, kept recording. Behind the desk, the studio didn't exhale, it braced. Karoline yanked off her mic like it was burning her, tossed it onto the table, where it landed with a soft thud that felt louder than it should have. She paced twice in a tight circle, breathing fast. "She set me up," she hissed to a nearby producer. She knew. She had that paper ready. She planned this. The producer didn't answer, just kept his eyes on the floor. "She wanted me to lose it," Karoline said, louder now. "And if I hadn't said anything, everyone would think it was true." But that was the problem. They already did. Off to the side, Jasmine quietly unclipped her mic, smoothed the front of her blazer. Not a word spoken, not a glance cast. Because she wasn't here to twist the knife. She had already handed the truth over, and the truth was doing just fine on its own. The control room buzzed. One producer whispered to another, "Should we cut the feed?" The other shook his head. Too late. One of the studio techs had already hit record when the tension started climbing. Instinct, maybe, or curiosity. Either way, the footage existed now. Within 30 minutes, it would exist online. The clip was short, just 14 seconds. Karoline's voice rising, the phrase, "She set me up," ringing clear, her tone sharp, panicked. Not the polished sound of a media professional. The raw sound of someone realizing the narrative had slipped out of their hands. And the internet? It doesn't wait. The video was clipped, subtitled, and posted before the next segment even aired. It spread fast. Not just because it was damning, but because it was real. This wasn't a spin. It was the consequence of strategy meeting substance, and losing. By the time the next show aired on that network, the clip had already crossed 3 million views. Not the official broadcast. The leaked footage. 14 seconds. Karoline Leavitt, pacing behind the desk, her voice tense, snapping, "She set me up." No edits, no graphics, just raw exposure. And people didn't just watch it, they felt it. Because for once, the subtext wasn't hidden. It was center screen, spoken out loud. Within an hour, hashtags took over. # Crockett Clarity, # Memogate, # she didn't even yell. Journalists started digging. Some didn't have to dig far. By nightfall, 2 former campaign aides from Leavitt's inner circle confirmed the memo's authenticity, quietly, off the record. Then, by morning, one went public. She'd seen the strategy unfold in real time, heard the closed-door briefings, read the language in internal Slack channels. It wasn't rogue, it wasn't unofficial, it was doctrine. And Jasmine? She didn't post a reaction clip. She didn't go on every morning show. She didn't even retweet the video. Instead, she stood outside a modest community center in Shreveport, Louisiana, flanked by local organizers and teen volunteers in oversized campaign t-shirts. No podium, just a folding mic stand and the truth. "I didn't bring that paper out to score points," she said. "I brought it out because silence protects patterns, and some patterns don't deserve protection." She paused, looked around, not at the cameras, but at the people. "You don't have to yell to be loud," she continued. "You don't have to match the volume to change the room. You just have to mean it." The press conference was short, 10 minutes maybe, but it echoed for days. Because Jasmine hadn't gone viral, she'd gone visible. And what people saw, what they couldn't unsee, was the cost of clarity in a world built on distortion. Not performance, not spectacle, just presence. And that was more disruptive than anything she could have shouted. It didn't stop when the headlines moved on. It grew. In classrooms in Atlanta and Newark, teachers played the clip, not the blow-up, but the stillness, the paper slide, the line, "This isn't personal, it's systemic." Middle schoolers wrote journal entries on what it meant to be called emotional, just for speaking up. High schoolers debated tone versus truth, and who gets to define either. Campaign staffers clipped it for training decks. Communications teams started reevaluating how they prepped candidates for difficult interviews. A young political strategist in Baltimore said it plain: Jasmine Crockett just gave every black woman in politics a new blueprint. Calm is not compliance. And Jasmine? She kept showing up. No fanfare, no sold-out speaking tours, just town halls, school visits, roundtable talks in underfunded districts that never made the news. At a small civic center in Tyler, Texas, she stood in front of 60 folding chairs and a mic that screeched every time someone shifted. One woman in the second row asked, "Do you think you changed anything?" Jasmine didn't rush the answer. She looked around, then nodded slowly. "I didn't come here to win arguments," she said. "I came here to make room for every voice that's been labeled too much, too loud, too angry, too emotional. And to show that clarity is louder than chaos." The applause was soft at first, then stronger. No roar, just recognition. Because what happened on that panel wasn't a takedown. It was a turning point, a moment where the world watched a black woman refuse to shrink and saw that her stillness had more force than someone else's fury. Jasmine didn't just hold space for herself, she expanded it. And for everyone who's ever been talked over, dismissed, or told to calm down just for speaking clearly, this story became something more than viral. It became validating. And if you're reading this, wondering what that kind of power feels like, it's quiet, but it's unforgettable. This story was brutal, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.